Hello, listeners. Welcome to Marie Lives the Horror. This is episode 29 of the series of True Paranormal Ghost Stories. In tonight's episode, we hear a precautionary tale of opening lines of communication with the other side. We also hear a story of a lonely spirit persistently reaching out for some attention, whether our author wanted it or not. And lastly, we hear of an experience of paranormal torment, which for this Redditor seemed to have no end in sight. Tonight's stories are presented in collaboration with the Dark Realm YouTube channel. Be sure to stop by and check out this awesome narrator, as well as the video that I did with her on her channel. A link to her channel will be down in the description below. So without further ado, step into my horror chamber as we live the horror together. Short backstory. 4 years ago, shortly after my mom died, I started playing with a spirit board, not believing it was real. Something got attached to me. One day I was sitting in a room with my friends while they played with the board themselves. They told me it was spelling out my name. Sure enough, it was. I walk over and ask what it wants, and it starts spelling out Mom, fast and repeatedly. I've never used one again. I was being followed by something for about 2 months after that. About 2 weeks ago, my friend bought some dowsing rods. I brought him over to my place and we started asking questions and got responses right away. This thing seemed like a benevolent entity, so we indulged it and kept playing occasionally, questioning it and trying to figure out what it is. I have a 2-year-old sister that has nightmares and wakes up practically every night and has to be rocked to sleep in a recliner in the living room. Yesterday, I was tossing and turning all night and could barely sleep. I woke up around 6 a.m. to the very same recliner rocking while everyone was asleep. I brought my friend back over and questioned it to try and figure out what it is. I asked if this was the same thing that followed me 4 years ago. It said yes. I asked if this thing was potentially my mom, and it said yes, but I knew it definitely wasn't. I just wanted to see if it was lying or not. I called bullshit to it and asked if this thing is what was on the rocking recliner, if it was evil, and if it was what I encountered 4 years ago. Said yes to everything. It could have lied, but I don't know. My friend was calling it names and asking it to show itself, make something move, etc. Nothing happened. Later that night, when I got home around midnight, I tried to go to sleep. I've never been so terrified in my life. I kept hearing shit happen every 15 seconds, it felt like. It was bad, loud, and very disturbing. I heard loud footsteps that seemed to be going around me. I heard my TV creak. I heard my fan physically move. I heard something in my kitchen move. And I swear I could feel when this thing was right next to me. Around 2 a.m., I wake up to my little sister screaming and crying, the worst it's ever been. I don't know what to do. Please, someone help. I've tried to convince my dad, but he flat out denies anything is going on and simply doesn't believe.
My childhood home is probably now well over 150 years old. I lived in this house for the most part of my life. It belonged to my grandmother's grandparents, then passed on to my parents, and now I'm supposed to inherit it. I can tell you, I never felt safe in that house at all. Whether it was mental traumas or actual hauntings, the house looked unwelcome and felt even more unwelcoming when you entered it. I would not want the house. I don't want to inherit it, nor would I encourage anyone to take it. For example, I came home from school one day and no one was home. My first bedroom was downstairs. The bedroom was right underneath the big hallway upstairs where people would have to walk past in order to get from room A to room B. I am not sure if my ears had any problem, but even if I was home alone, the floorboards upstairs would creak as if someone was walking up there. And on some days, it would sound like a bunch of people having a shuffling party. Anyway, I came home. I did the usual of putting things away and went into the bedroom to chill out. I, as usual, would hear sounds of people walking back and forth. Nothing unusual would ever happen, but on that day, I heard something drop from upstairs. I never felt brave enough to go upstairs by myself, so I had my dog with me. 3 dogs, actually. All of the pets that I had. Turned out, it was a photo of my late grandpa that fell off the shrine thing. This is where we put framed photos of dead relatives to offer them food in the afterlife. It couldn't be any rats since my cats literally wiped out the mice. It couldn't be the wind because the windows weren't opened. It was pitch black and I had to use the flashlight to find the light switch. I went to pick up the photo of my late grandpa and it wasn't broken, luckily. But when I picked it up, the photo was of him having a sinister smile and I suddenly felt a brush on my arm. I dropped the photo again and it went back to looking like how it did originally, when I took the photo of him when he was still alive. But the glass was broken and the frame came loose. I just ran back downstairs. My pets were growling at first, but then ran off after making a wimpy sound as if someone kicked them. I looked at all of them and they were okay, but they just kept staring at the stairs with skepticism. Needless to say, I was told to go back up and clean the area by myself again. I opened all the windows and turned on all the lights. I even borrowed my uncle's bright construction spotlight just to make it bright enough to feel safe again. That's all. But there's more. Much more. It's all just coming back to me about how most things I experienced there weren't even real.
Long read warning. I grew up in a house. It was 2 stories, I guess. It had a main floor and a basement. The basement was unfinished and had a concrete floor. And the house was nice. I actually liked the house growing up. Sort of. I'll start it off with the bedroom I shared with my younger brother. This house had a wraparound porch in the front. Basically, it was kept empty. We just kept our shoes out there. However, there's this window that looks into the bedroom from the porch. I made my mom paint it immediately, because I always envisioned someone's face being in the window at night, looking into the room. Even with this painted, just knowing the window was there gave me chills. Now the basement. I hated this part of the house more than anything. It's one of those places, if you're sensitive to paranormal stuff, you can just feel it around you. You know something is there. You can practically hear whatever it is talking to you. Every time you walked back up the stairs to the main floor, it was like you were being chased down. Even if you stopped yourself from running, it was like something was right there behind you, breathing down your neck. The door to the basement would open and close on its own all the time. It became so frequent, we just shrugged and closed the door from then on. My little sister's toys would start playing music and going off on their own in the middle of the night. The strangest thing is, though, I think this thing, whatever it is, has been attached to me my entire life. The reason I say this is because I live in an entirely different state. I'm married. I live on my own now with my wife in an apartment complex that was just built maybe 2 years ago, and the last person in our apartment itself was my wife's cousin, so no one died in here. Yet the creepiest stuff happens here. Our walls are blue, so in the right light, you can see handprints along the walls. We don't have kids, and the handprints are too small to be us. My dog also reacts to a lot in our master bathroom, to the point she hides underneath our bed and growls in that direction. Let me know your thoughts on this, or if you've experienced similar things. I'm curious if someone possibly has an answer.
I moved into a new house with my family 2 years ago. As soon as I walked in, I felt strange, like something was not right, but I didn't pay attention to it. The first 4 months in the new house passed without anything strange happening. Then, all of a sudden, one day, strange things started happening in the house. That same day, my dog started crying for no reason. The iron door of the boiler room in my garden fell off, but it was perfectly sealed. The TV was switching on and off by itself. The lights would turn off without reason. Things started getting scary when I went out of my house into the garden and I saw a broken bucket full of water. There was a large crack in the bucket surface, but something was holding the water like it was in an intact bucket. As soon as I started staring at it, the water poured out of the bucket through the crack. Since that day, strange things started happening every day. Bottles of wine opening by themselves, doors and windows closing and opening, and their handles rotating as if a person was doing it. I told my story to a friend, and she introduced me to a friend of hers that was really into this sort of thing. I borrowed an EMF meter and a device that translates EVPs to real words from him, and I waited for the right time to use them. Later that day, I turned off the electricity in my house and I went in every room of my house with the EMF meter. When I entered my bedroom, it rose up to the max level. I turned on the EVP translator and I said, "If you are here, touch this device," pointing at the EMF meter. 1 second later, it rose up to max level again. So I started talking, and the words that showed up on the EVP translator were always correct responses to my questions. Never a word without context. So this ghost told me that she is a female, that she likes my dog, and that she's interested in knowing me. I stopped talking to her when my mom walked in the room. Since that day, I felt this ghost was following me all day and trying to get my attention by dropping objects that I was watching, causing me to get so scared. She would only go away when I was with someone else. She knew that I knew she was there, that she existed, so she was searching for my company. I saw a deodorant bottle falling off a shelf in 2 movements. First, it moved close to the border, then stopped, and then it fell off the shelf, so I was sure these events weren't natural. When I was alone, I always felt she was there with me, and every time I felt a strong sense of sadness coming from her. I don't know how to explain this properly. It was like she was really, really sad and was transmitting her sadness to me. I started ignoring her because I was so scared, and she started trying to get my attention more and more. First, I started seeing shadows and movement with the corner of my eye when I walked alone in the house. Then, one day, I saw her shadow on the wall. It was so real that I thought my mom or my sister entered the room. But when I turned my head, I saw that no one was there with me, and only in that moment, I realized it was her shadow. I saw her shadow almost every day until 4 days ago when I left my parents' house and moved to a new city to go to college. She was appearing to me in a more clear way every day. So I think that if I moved out 1 or 2 weeks later, I would have seen her directly somehow.
Hello there. Nice to meet you all. I posted this story of mine years ago on a paranormal website called Paranormal 360, which is now unfortunately closed down. My post had the most views on the website and thought I'd post it here for you all to read. If any of you have any questions at all, feel free to ask anything. Apologies if there's any spelling mistakes. I have a few more experiences that I can write about, but it's only minor things. This story you're about to read is by far the most scared I've ever been. My 5 months of torment. Before I start this story, I'd just like to explain a few things. Since my nan's death and the hardships I faced growing up, I've always felt my nan with me, from about 18 to 19 onwards to present day. She's helped me in little bits here and there. Because of her being with me, I feel sensitive to other spirits around me. I'm not saying I'm a medium and should be on most haunted, but I do sense a lot of things. I don't see spirits in general, but I see them through my mind's eye. It's like a visual representation of what my eyes don't see. If I mention the mind's eye through anything of what I've wrote, you will understand where it comes from. Please, if you have any questions about this or anything I've wrote, feel free to comment. I will elaborate on anything you want to know. At the age of 23, I moved out of my nan's house. It was a very sad but happy moment for me. I was finally getting on with my life, moving forward. As my life changed, so too did my 5-year relationship with my partner, which ended. The house I moved to was a decent size. You couldn't tell by looking at it from the outside, though. It was longer than it was wide. From the door, the hallway led up to the bottom of the stairs, with 2 doors on the left-hand side. The door closest to the front door led to a small front room, and the second door led to a bigger middle room, which was open plan combined with a small kitchen. There were 2 doors in the kitchen. The one on the left led to the garden, and the one on the right led to the bathroom. It had 3 bedrooms, and the only toilet was in the bathroom. Really not good. The first day I moved in was amazing. I never felt better. While John, the homeowner, was out, I decided I'd wash all the new cutlery and plates in the sink. While doing so, I heard footsteps from the hallway. I froze for a split second to take in what I heard, and the footsteps carried on to about halfway up the stairs and stopped. I could feel the hairs on my body stand on end. I felt this sudden feeling of dread, and it was really uncomfortable. I shouted, "John?" No answer. I knew there wouldn't be an answer, and after all, nobody came in through the front door. Nonetheless, I checked all 3 bedrooms, and nothing. The house was silent, and I still had this feeling of dread. I carried on with the washing up, trying to forget about it, and about half an hour later, John came home. Everything was okay for a while. I had feelings of dread every now and again, but it was tolerable. Nowhere near as much as when I heard the footsteps. Say 2 months down the line, when the dark nights were drawing in, I was lying on my bed with my new partner. She was due to go home in about 15 minutes as her dad was picking her up. She had work the next day, and it was quicker for her to get to her work from her house rather than from mine. She used to stay over during the weekends or when our days off matched. Anyways, we were lying on my bed. She looked up and suddenly started shaking. Frozen stiff, but shaking, staring fixated at the ceiling. When I asked her what was wrong, as it was scaring me a little, she said she saw some kind of smoke appear in the corner of the ceiling, and then a face appeared through the ceiling staring at her for a few seconds before vanishing. She was as white as a sheet. That same feeling of dread came over me like when I heard the footsteps, and it worried me. This feeling of dread seemed more intense. We both decided to go downstairs and wait for her dad in the front room. While there, she just sat quietly until the sound of her dad's horn was heard. While alone, I closed the front room door and sat with the TV on. John came home about 10 minutes later, and those 10 minutes in the house alone were very tense for me and felt like hours. Thankfully, John being back took my mind off what had happened. I didn't mention anything to him at this point. It wasn't long after that I started to sense something around the house during my days off. I couldn't put my finger on what it was at first, but after about half a day, I picked up feelings of sadness and loneliness. A million miles away from the feeling of dread I usually got, which was a breath of fresh air. On a weekend off from work, I came downstairs to have some breakfast, and through my mind's eye, on the floor opposite to where I was, I saw a small long bench with a young child sitting in the middle crying, with his hands clenched, rubbing his eyes. Then it came to me. This was this feeling of sadness and loneliness I was having. He looked to be about 4 to 5 years old. That was the start of it all. Every time after that, I'd sense him running around the house, standing or sitting down by me when I was playing my Xbox, standing by me watching TV, looking at the food I was eating, and just generally following me around the house. I even got that used to it that I turn on the TV in the front room on occasion while I cleaned up or played my 360 upstairs. The feeling of dread was still looming around the house, but again it was tolerable. It was faint. I kept that I could sense this little boy to myself. That was until my partner saw this little figure run past my door and then run into my room as if running at her, which made her jolt as if bracing for the impact. That's when I told her that I could sense him around. Before she could tell me how he looked, I quickly asked her if I could tell her instead, just so what I was seeing in my mind's eye was right and I wasn't going mad. I've done a lot over the years, and I've been right every time. This little boy was wearing dirty black shoes, gray knee-length socks that were down by his ankles in a way that looked scruffy, a pair of dirty black shorts, a gray t-shirt, and gray scruffy cap that the boy was very thin. My partner confirmed all of this with a startling stare and added that she felt sorry for him. She asked me if I'd seen anything else in the house. I told her I hadn't, but I get this feeling of dread through the whole house. She went quiet for a few seconds and then mentioned that when she was around on the second night of me living there, she'd gone for a cigarette by the open kitchen door, which led to the garden. After about a minute, she felt someone grip her shoulder. But when she turned to, there was no one there, as we were all in the front room. And while smoking her fag, she constantly felt that someone was standing right up to her face. John was also interested in the paranormal, and it wasn't long until me, my partner John, and a few of his friends were using a makeshift Ouija board. The letters and numbers were all on separate pieces of paper, and the words yes and no were at each end of our Ouija board arrangement. We used an overturned glass to put our fingers on. We managed to contact this little boy, and we asked him to spell out his name. The pointer went to no. Then it clicked. He was too young to spell his name. He didn't know the year he died either, or the day, or the month. It was a shame. As it came about, this spirit boy saw me as a big brother and saw my partner as a mother. Through asking him questions, we found out that the boy was left to die of starvation. His mother went out one day and didn't come back. It upset us all. I asked the boy if there was anybody he didn't like in the house. I asked this because of the feeling of dread I kept having. I wanted to try and understand what and where this feeling of dread was coming from. I knew this feeling was coming from a male, but that was it. I got my answer. The glass moved to yes. I asked more questions. Can you point the glass to where this person is? No. Is the person you don't like in this room? No. Then I asked if the person was upstairs. Yes. Is he upstairs now? Yes. Does he scare you? Yes. Then I asked, there's a male upstairs, isn't there? No answer. So I asked the same question in a different way. Is there a nasty man upstairs? Yes. I'd sensed correct. There was a male presence. Does the nasty man live above the bedrooms? Yes. It clicked for both me and my partner. That face she saw through my bedroom ceiling was this male. It was not good. I started to push more questions, to understand what was going on, and to confirm what I felt was going on. Does this man come out at night? Yes. And you hide from him? Yes. Is he angry a lot? Yes. He doesn't like me, does he? No. Because of my Nan? Yes. This male presence didn't like John or my partner either. Does he know we are talking about him? Nothing. I asked again. Nothing. All a little freaked out, we decided to call it time as our food was cooked. John closed our session, thanking the spirits for our protection and their communication. This male presence became stronger. During the day, the house was filled with more dread, no matter where I went. At nighttime, I kept the door to my room closed and could feel this male presence angrily walking around the house, especially walking past my room. I could feel him stopping outside my room and staring at me, as if the door wasn't there, as if he knew exactly where my head was and where I was sitting. This happened every night. At times, the feeling was so bad, I wouldn't come out of my room to eat or drink, only for the toilet. Would I leave the room, and then I'd make sure all the lights were on in the house. From about 7 till I went to bed. Some nights this male would spend the entire night just staring at me through the door. Those were the times I'd have an early night and want to bed as fast as possible. When my partner stayed over, she'd go downstairs during the night to use the toilet and find the back room and kitchen lights on. All lights would be turned off when John was home and when my partner stayed over. Sometimes the kitchen light or the back room light of the front room would be on. Then one time the kitchen light came on its own, and she walked to the light switch to switch it off. Another time she went downstairs to the toilet and she screamed. I ran downstairs to find her sitting on the bottom step. She told me she opened the door to see the kitchen light flicking on and off with a huge black shape in the middle. I shot in the middle of the room and the light was on, but no black shape. I stayed with her a while. She went to the toilet and we stayed awake that night. We were tired and thirsty, but too scared to do anything. This stuff was happening every other day now. On my day off, I'd avoid trying to go downstairs unless John was there. I get something from the chip shop and eat it on the way home. That way I could just go straight upstairs. I'd just also like to point out that a good chunk of all that experienced happened while John was away. He was away a lot. Sometimes with work and other times for breaks with a few friends, on top of everything that was going on. At the time, I lived in Wolverhampton and worked in Perry Bar, which isn't far from Birmingham. The days were long. I was up at 5:30 every morning to get to work for 8:30, and I'd get home around 8 or 9. It was important that I had my sleep. What happened this one morning happened almost every morning after that until I left the house. I woke up about 4:45 a.m. to my door wide open with that feeling of dread there. I just got up, closed it, and then went back to sleep, only to find that my door was wide open again when I woke up to my alarm. Still, I thought nothing of it. That was until I was being woken between 4:30 and 5 a.m. every morning I had work. One morning, I woke to someone breathing on my face. I shot up, but there was nothing but the feeling of dread. It was getting to me now. I wasn't sleeping right or living right. I decided to place a pair of my trainers against the door before I went to bed, and still my door would be wide open with a load of pressure and feeling of dread all over me, and I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. I was getting more tired as the days went on. When I confronted John about all this, He told me that he was shocked. He told me he heard voices coming from the hallway while he's in bed, and there's been knocking on his bedroom door. He thought it was me messing about, but when he opened his door, my door was shut, and there was no way I'd make it back to my room that quick without making a noise. He told me there was more whispering and knocking on his door when I wasn't there. It got to a point where I went to bed when John wasn't there. I'd leave all the lights on and TV on all night in the house. If I had to go to the toilet, I'd wait until I was almost bursting to go, and as soon as I got home from work, I'd go straight upstairs and not move from my room. Night after night, I keep waking up, and it was tiring me right out. That feeling of dread, it was like the presence was watching me sleep. It wasn't long after all this that I eventually moved house again to my aunt's. Everything there was calmer, although it was the amount of spirits in that house that freaked me out. That male presence in the house didn't like me at all. I felt that the spirit was unable to approach me mentally, as my nan was blocking him out, and instead he was trying to wear me down physically. For what purpose, I'll never know, and in ways, I'm glad I never will. I've never gone back to that house, and I doubt I ever will. I just feel bad for that little boy. Hello, listeners. Thank you all for listening to tonight's episode of True Paranormal Ghost Stories as you live the horror with me. I would like to thank my guest, The Dark Realm, for joining me on this episode. Stop by her channel and check out some of her other divinely horrific content. If you have your own spooky ghost story that you would like to submit for this series, check the description down below and send them over to my email. To support my channel, please don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell to keep up with future episodes. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Marie Lives the Horror.